Welcome to the Sunday Superversive Livestream. Benjamin Wheeler, and I'm here with. Oh, no, wait, my co-host is gone, and it's just me. Except I do have a guest, and that's Korsgaard, the editor for Battleborn Mag. How are you today, Sean?
I'm doing pretty spectacular, my friend. Like I was telling you before the show, the funder for the magazine is a mere $80 from breaking that level we need to fund the first issue. And as far as ways to end the weekend go, I'd say that's a damn good one.
I agree. I'm only glad about this happening. It's an amount of joy, even to see new products come out, especially by fellow travel. Big fan of the Schmittian rule of end enemy distinction thing. For my enemies, the law, but because I have no power in the law, I just like them a bit. That's all I got. But if I get the law, so why don't you tell us a bit about Battleborn? What sort of things we can? Well, over 90% to your edition. So this is something people are excited for. Tell us who might be unfamiliar with your work.
So, for those unfamiliar with my work, my name is Sean C.W. Korsgaard. I am a U.S. Army veteran, longtime former photojournalist. I've worked in the field of speculative fiction as an editor, reviewer, and writer for the past 5 years, be it from analog science fiction and fact to Writers of the Future to a stint with Bane Books. Currently, I am the editor of Anvil magazine for Iron Age Media, which should have 2 new issues on the way soon. But what brings me here today is the second magazine I'm launching with Iron Age Media, Battleborn, a collection of two-fisted heroic fantasy, blood and thunder, sword and sorcery in that classical sense, the very best of the classics, the modern, today, delivered right into your hands, be it paper or ebook, starting, ideally, 3 times a year, but growing from there. We've got some of the biggest names, the greatest heroes, and more action than you'll know what to do with in every issue. World-class artwork, some history. I cannot wait for all of you to get this magazine in your hands.
Excellent. And believe pretty excited about this. It's a printed mag, sword and I'm going to real. I have been Thune's Vision and other things by Skylar Hearnstrom.
Speaking of Skylar
just hasn't been publishing.
I mean, have you looked at our table of contents? Mr. Hearnstrom is one of our fine number.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. Not only is he contributing fiction, and the short story we have, Mortu and Kyrus in the White City, is not only one I think one of the finest examples of his work, but one of the finest short stories in the sword and sorcery genre of the past few years. But he came to us with a cartoon series that's sort of a tribute to 2000 AD, that sort of cheeky, bloody, yet still funny humor that was the highlight of so many of those 80s fan mags, Frug. And we're having that comic run in every issue of Battleborn moving forward. So he has a bit of twisted humor and comic fun along the way, and maybe even a third thing for Mr. Hearnstrom that we'll be announcing later on if the support shows it worthy of it. Sorry, I'm an incorrigible tease. You'll only get to hear about the first 2 tonight.
I was never good. Not my style, not my. However, Skylar Hearnstrom allowed to support. I see that there's quite a few ways to support. He said that there were some special offerings in the higher tier. I'm kind of interested in this. And then what we'll do is we'll go around and stuff that you've announced so far.
Delighted. So at least right now, as we speak, I don't know when this goes live on your end, but as we speak right now, we're $100 away from fully funding issue 1, which means February 18th, 2026, short of a catastrophic failure on my part to collect a further $86 for the crowdfunder, everyone watching right now will be able to have a copy of my magazine either in their hands or on their Kindles with a snap of the wrist. It'll be there. Beautiful. 70,000 words, 10,000 words nonfiction, artwork, cover art, the whole shebang, the head, the tail, the whole damn thing. And for those of you who know your genre history, we picked that date deliberately. February 18th, for those who don't know, was the day that the first issue of Weird Tales dropped so many, many decades ago, the birth cry of the genre. This one is the battle cry, I guess you could say, from the front lines of fantasy. That is our maxim, because we want every issue packed start to finish with heroics, action, daring do that leave you on the edge of the seat, your hair standing up, and your heart pounding like a battle drum. But we hit that 5,000 goal, like you mentioned. What's the more ambitious ones? Well, between friends, I'm aiming for at least 20,000 because that guarantees all 3 issues next year. That same length we talked about, more artwork, and everything afterward goes right to the authors. Because I firmly believe in covering the people who write for me in as much gold and glory as possible. But what else? Of course, we've got the issues. We're going to be rolling out a lot of goodies like challenge coins for people to add on. We've had a lot of people asking for a hardcover edition, and you have my word, we are looking into adding one as a crowdfunder exclusive. So for those of you who like your sword and sorcery, pretty enough for a coffee table book, we will stand and deliver. We're looking into starting a podcast. We're even looking into rolling out audiobooks within the next year. That way you can take your heroic fiction with you everywhere you need to go in every form you like. And some of the people we've talked to on that front have some wild ideas for what we can do on the audio front. Of course, those of you who've read Anvil magazine know we work a lot with independent comic creators. And again, we are very happy that our authors, we are working within what they're comfortable with, but those who are willing to work with us on comic adaptations, we hope to start work on a few of those within the next year or two as well. So, multimedia. That is the big beefy one if we go above and beyond what we need to. I know I can deliver the best damned fantasy magazine any of you have held within this or any lifetime. But it's the really wild projects I'd like to expand upon that really open some interesting possibilities.
Very nice indeed. Authors, you said you had Skylar Hernstrom. What else do you have, and what are they known for?
So, I am very pleased to say that we have among our authors a murderer's row of the finest fiction writers in sword and sorcery and fantasy today. Give or take one or two that, well, I might be holding close to vest or hope to have them in the future. But our very first issue, that cover story, is a trifecta, a triumvirate, rather, of some of our finest authors. One is, of course, the late, great Howard Andrew Jones, who played an instrumental role in the formation of not only the sword and sorcery renaissance, but this magazine in particular would not exist without him. We have one of his Hanavar stories, which, if your listeners take nothing else away, aside from throw some money at our Indiegogo and buy at least one of these books, his book should be where you start, Lord of Shattered Land. It is, to my mind, the finest fantasy novel published in the past 25 years. It takes all comers and beats them handily. It's a generational work of sword and sorcery, and its hero, Hanavar, is the heart and soul of his story, which has an interesting track to publication because it was initially the first story Howard ever published almost 25 years ago. Then a few years back, he rewrote it and published it as the first Hanuvar story in Heroic Fiction Quarterly. And the version here is, for those who don't know, Howard was diagnosed with brain cancer last August, around the time we're speaking now, 1 year ago. He died in January. I don't know what will be done with the rest of his stories moving forward.
I'm sorry to hear that.
We lost a tremendous talent, but as far as a banner to carry forward, I am proud to be carrying his. But this story in particular is a little taste for what might have come next, or if we're fortunate, what might still come next. But from other authors, we have C.L. Werner. For all of our Warhammer fans, he was a huge name within the Age of Sigmar and all that fiction. And he has a character by the name of Shintaro Oba, a demon-slaying Ronin in a Japanese-style fantasy setting. Werner, as it turns out, is a devoted fan of classic samurai movies and kaiju flicks. He knows more about Godzilla than I think anyone I've ever met. So he takes that love of the samurai movie or the Ronin dramas and his childlike wonder, love of monster flicks, and combines them. And The Blood of the Oni, his story he wrote for us, is a perfect introduction to his Oba stories. It has his Ronin character newly on the trail. It's early in his career, so it's almost the first story within the sequence, close to it, I think. So for those unfamiliar, great introduction, and then you've got a heck of a journey ahead of you. Jaguar's Children by Greg Mell, who writes a lot of Greco, Native American influence fiction. Like, he has a fantasy setting that's Bronze Age, Aztec, Greek influenced. It's very fascinating world building. And his hero, Sarumos, is a swashbuckler.
That is interesting.
Is a swashbuckler in the vein of Captain Blood. For any of you familiar with indie science fiction and fantasy, Eric Wogg and T.J. Marquis are two of the punchier authors in that field, and I'm proud to say they brought that fighting spirit full force to their first stories in Battleborn. Now, Robert E. Howard probably doesn't need much introduction, but I'm proud to say that we all love Conan, of course. We love Solomon Kane. We love Call of Atlantis. But Robert E. Howard, by the time he was 30, had written so much fiction that even today does not get nearly the glory by readers. So we hope to highlight some of those more obscure ones. Case in point, our first issue has what I think is his finest poem, The Road of Kings, which if it doesn't make your heart pound by the end, check your pulse. You're dead, brother. But the prize of that first issue, because one thing that we really want to emphasize with Battleborn is that we stand on the shoulders of giants. Every issue is going to have a reprint of a classic tale, ideally one that hasn't been reprinted in decades in some cases. That first issue is The Pearls of the Vampire Queen by Michael Shea, a Niftaline story. Now, for those who might not be acquainted, because see, you're a man of culture, you know Niftaline. But for your viewers who don't, Niftaline is one of the holy grails of heroic fantasy because it was the last work of sword and sorcery to win the World Fantasy Award way back in 1980, and it has not been reprinted since the 1990s. And it's very important that anyone who loves Niftaline back us and support us, because I am devoted to seeing those books back in print. And more importantly, we got 3 Niftaline books. Speaking with his widow, I learned there is a 4th Niftaline book. And it is very important to me that I get a chance to read that book. So I want to be able to, this time next year, be able to show the sales numbers for issue 1, the numbers from this crowdfunder to a couple publishing companies, and be all the people wondering if there's demand for Niftaline. Here you go. Let's bring it back. But beyond that first issue, we've got do you know Christopher Rocchio?
I once had 2 of his books signed to father a friend who Rocchio and I.
He is one of the most tremendous talents in our genre today. And I think His space opera will measure up with the greats, Herbert, Wolfe, Card. And I'm proud to say, after he publishes the last Sun Eater book this November, he's got his sights on heroic fantasy and sword and sorcery next. And we are one of the first places his new hero, Adaman, is making his debut. And maybe it's just...
Oh my.
I know, I'm thrilled. And, well, for all the people who love Hadrian Marlowe and the Sun Eater, you guys haven't seen anything yet. He is doing some of the finest work of his career, which says a lot because there is no shortage of fine work from that man. And I'm looking forward to seeing where he goes with the character forward. Hopefully, with a few more stories in future issues of Battleborn. Michael Stackpole probably doesn't need much introduction. But just in case, we're talking about one of the most legendary authors who's dabbled in everything from Star Wars to Dungeons and Dragons to Battletech. And he has with us an original setting called The Drowned Empire, very Zelazny-esque. And I can't wait for everyone to fall in love with the way I have. David Drake, we're reprinting the Mantic, one of his Vedius and Dama stories. Hasn't been reprinted since '88. We have a couple of Gabriel de Catar stories from Robert Rhodes, a Rogan story from Stephen L. Shrewsbury, John C. Hawking, who is one of the finest authors in the world today in terms of writing in the style of Robert E. Howard. For that matter, so is Mike Stackpole. But he has a capstone to one of his personal heroes, Ben-Hus, the Kingsblade. And the third author who taps that Howard style, Scott Oden, is making his triumphant return to sword and sorcery in our pages with The Blood of Outraymer, which is a Crusader story following a character known as the Crow of Nas Lagain. Celtic Crusader, very classic adventure style, and it's good to see Scott writing back in true form. But there's a little something for everybody, and more importantly, because I know there's always the aspiring author watching this. We hit that 22,000 mark I mentioned, we will have an open submission period. If I'm doing my math right, about 20,000 words left in issue for those first three. 60,000 words, and a chance to see your name published beside everybody from Robert E. Howard to Michael Stackpole. And I want all of you, of course, to convince as many people as you can to back us for the moment. But the moment that slush pile enters, bring your A game. Give me your very best in that heroic tradition. Write the kind of story that touches my soul and makes the blood pound like a thunderstorm. I want you to earn that spot, because when you do, I will be proud to call you a brother to every author in my magazine.
That is inspiring, especially for authors like me who find no tuck with the world and its petty little games.
Well, that's one of the appeals of sword and sorcery, isn't it? It's that it's a genre for rebels, outriders, the kinds of people who heroic epic fantasy. You always have the promised prince, or the guy who finds out he's the long lost heir to a prophecy, or aided by the gods. Sword and sorcery, you win your throne by your own hand, or you die trying. There's just something wonderfully American about the entire genre.
It's true. Thinking on back to its history, it is one of those things that while there have been, adventure stories in England and France, they've always been, like the Knights of Chivalry and stuff, too far gone to be in our grandfather's memories, or a little mealy-mouthed or sarcastic in ways that perhaps honest that an American would enjoy them, unless you're a hybrid like me. So having these sort of things presented honestly is definitely better for the soul, especially the American soul, I think.
Well, part of it is it's a very American take on that heroic tradition. I love Professor Tolkien, and I love that European fantasy tradition. I learned Anglo-Saxon just so I could read Beowulf in its original form, for crying out loud. But Sword and Sorcery was founded on that pulp DNA, the same stuff that gave us everything from the noir detective, the Louis L'Amour Western, vigilante heroes, everything from the Shadow to Doc Savage to the Executioner, to say nothing of the comic book superhero. It's a very different, more action-driven, serialized approach whose heroes have different values, different goals, different DNA. And I will say it's always fun to see outside authors take stabs at it. I mean, one of the greatest Sword and Sorcery authors is a proudly British Michael Moorcock with Elric of Melniboné. He played with the tools, I think, better than almost anyone else in the genre alive. And he's still writing to this day. So, Mr. Moorcock, I salute you. But you don't have Sword and Sorcery as we understand it without that American pulp tradition. And you can't have it come back without an understanding and respect for it. You cannot abandon that route. I mean, just ask Dungeons and Dragons how deviating from that Sword and Sorcery DNA worked out for them.
It's true. I saw the I'm sure everyone in our circles has by now seen the Thing Girls going crazy, and all I think of is they have finally portraying dimension in what they call the street.
I just don't know what they... Nothing against the people who like Taylor Swift, but I doubt there's much market overlap between them and tabletop role-playing.
It's true. I think it's kind of together, and rather than saying, "Oh yeah, we're just the weird ones. It's all good," they're trying to be like, "Oh no, we're the normal ones." It's like, no, buddy. The quarterback and the head cheerleader having a date is more normal than you'll ever be. Just accept it. Enjoy it. Buy some Battleborn magazine. You see that? You see how I brought that back in?
Always.
I could have been a 19 ad executive all the way down. But no, that's the lineup. That's a fantastic fantastic lineup, especially for, if you don't mind me speaking a bit bluntly, especially for Christopher Rocchio. Sun Eater is fine, but I do want to see him stretch his muscles a bit, become a bit more than just the Sun Eater guy.
I think
because even though he's had
I think by this time next year, especially as he starts writing more Adaman stories, both for us and elsewhere, he will more than prove he's got that muscles and more.
Very good. Very good. Skylar, Robert Howard, Andrew Jones, Niftaline. I am looking forward to that Niftaline. I have it in my collection. I should put back properly then.
I highly recommend it. Few people in genre have ever written the way Michael Shea did. He is so verbose and vivid as an author in terms of how he describes his settings and his action in a way so few authors ever manage to be. I mean, there's almost nobody else in the field like him. So the fact that he isn't such a household name as he was, as he should continue to be, that's another one of those causes I will happily charge forward with, because we have a wonderful heritage within our genre. We have such wonderful fiction that deserves to be back in the public mind. And I'm happy to point it out for those who want to find it.
Of course. Stuff like this is valuable. I think there's always talk about publishing and stuff like that, but in reality, if you were to look at the grand scheme of publishing, In reality, it's all been like vanity presses and people distributing their books and stuff. The actual mega organisms of the big five or big four or big three or whoever are actually fairly relatively new within the. There was bigger book publishers in England and other places. In reality, much of it was done, by the people themselves, and I'm always glad to see it more and more. You know what I mean?
I do. Publishing's in a very strange position these days, not just for the fact the big three have, in less than 5 years, become the big three, but for the fact indie publishing is still very much in its Wild West phase. We've seen fortunes made, fortunes lost, authors who can sell 1 million books when trad pub authors are lucky to sell a couple hundred. Entire new genres like lit RPG rise and fall. And admittedly, that's part of our business model of Battleborn. We have profit sharing on our merchandise and stuff with our authors. We are putting a heavy focus on making sure we're available in digital day one for every issue. But there has to be a way to do it where people can still make a living at it. And I think that's the big issue, trad pub indie, where it's feast or famine. It used to be a lot easier to be a mid-lister or to make money on your back catalog. And especially these days, finding the way to do that is one of those ways that whoever cracks that nut will make a mint and we will all rush to follow. Likewise, I published Sword and Sorcery. That is a genre that's blood and fan base has always been predominantly male. And for better or worse, that is an audience that so much of traditional publishing has ignored or too often spurned. That's not to preclude women don't like Sword and Sorcery. One of those funny facts that I love to bring up with Sword and Sorcery is way back in the 1970s or 80s, the golden age of the genre, 40% of the people buying Conan and Elric paperbacks were women. They still love that stuff. Not every woman wants to have people.
Yep.
There are women who want fantasy about slaying monsters as much as sleeping with them. And providing that to them is a public service, as much as it is to provide fantasy for young men, young women, grown men. The kind of fantasy that's fun to read, teaches you heroics.
Or perhaps they like the fantasy of big burly the slave girl over their shoulder. Perhaps. Or
for that matter, thin, lithe Elric thinking they can fix him. And every single Elric of Melniboné story telling you, that is a terrible idea. You cannot fix him. Stormbringer has worked too hard to ruin that man. But Sword and Sorcery has a chance to be one of the, especially our Renaissance, to take advantage of the fact that there is entire markets that publishing has ignored. And even for people who serve the existing publishing market, that is a victory for all of us, because when the pie grows, we all eat better. The more readers exist, the more books everyone sells. I'm a firm believer in the old military maxim, one team, one fight. I am not in competition against this publisher or that publisher, this small press or that big publisher. I am in competition against people who don't want to buy books. I'm in competition against the day I walk into a Barnes & Noble and they're dumping the last of the fantasy novels on clearance so they can put in more manga and Funko Pops. I want people to keep buying books, to continue that tradition, to love to read, because I know the difference a good book can make on somebody, because it's made that difference with me time and time again. Every time I pick up a book, I chase that same feeling when I was 13 years old reading Conan the first time, or the first time I read The Lord of the Rings, or the first time I read Elric, or for that matter, the first time I read The Chronicles of Hanavar by Howard Andrew Jones. I love that feeling, and there's a spark of it in every story within Battleborn. And I hope that everyone who reads it gets that feeling too, because that joy, that thrill, the way a story can touch your soul and make you want to drive forward and achieve greatness, that is what every storyteller wants from the art. for their stories to inspire you to march that extra mile, go to work and do your job well, to hug your kids and do great things.
It's true. It's like we said, it's part of the American experience to have this sort of adventure and to take life by your own hands. I think that was one of the big appeals of them back in the day, where you would see a man, two-fisted tails or something like that. People might say, "Oh, that's for punching and stuff like that," but I always imagine, grabbing the one sword or another. At least that's what my.
No, it is. It's one of the defining traits of not only Conan, but multiple other figures. Conan is not some promised prince who Gandalf the Grey nurtures and leads to retake the throne. He is a reaver, a slayer, a mercenary, destined to tread the jeweled, destined to wear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia upon a troubled brow and tread the kingdoms of the earth beneath his sandaled feet. He wins a throne by the strength of his sword arm and his wits. He is a self-made man, not a prophesized king. Something he is very, very insistent upon with his own settings. Conversely, you have Elric of Melniboné, who starts as an emperor of a dying, decaying empire and descends into being a mercenary, journeying the world, trying to find his purpose, discover the meaning of the gods, a battle between chaos and order. Even if in a truly spectacular twist, Elric dies in the third Elric story. So every other Elric story after that takes place between them. So you know how his battle ends, and there is a nobility to that struggle to continue to fight on and find meaning in spite of knowing that the journey is destined to end the way it does. Or Fafhrd the Grey Mouser, the gold standard thieves within the genre, finding fortune and fighting dark forces every step of the way. There's no shortage of heroes to look upon in a genre, and so many of them build upon that tradition that is familiar to anyone who's read Doc Savage or The Shadow or even Superman and Batman.
It's true. I still remember Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser almost as well as I remember Conan. Criticism in Conan, but oftentimes it's happening to him rather than, shall we say, him bringing it on himself through some sort of mystic idea. And as I've always found that interesting. It's like Conan exists as a non-spiritual man in a very, very spiritual world.
I mean, it's half the fun of it. I mean, it's not uncommon for a sword and sorcery character like Conan for the next story to quite literally thrust you into the middle of the story, where he is fleeing from some past adventure or just escape from some death-defying odds. Or by the end of the story, be thrust into something new or end off in worse circumstances. To bring up Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, I think their first story, it's a dungeon delving story. Classic one. And the twist being that the dungeon they're in is the inside of a monster, and the treasure they accidentally steal is its brain. And then they got to flee their way out as the thing is dying around them. But it's a wonderful, wonderful way to explore circumstances and heroism. Sword and sorcery is.
It is. So you described some things for the future. So for the next Battleborn mag, are you going to bring in the same things, or you mentioned something about different volumes?
So
how is these things being developed?
So volume 1 is, as we speak, $80 away from basically being completed. Wonderful. I love it. The rest of the crowdfunder is going to be to finance the next 2. The stories I mentioned are spread across each 3 with, give or take, 10 to 20,000 words left for submissions under an ideal circumstance. But The good news is for the stories I mentioned that are listed in our crowdfunder and have been covered elsewhere, they're all completed. They are turned in my inbox right now. We're formatting them, getting them ready.
Very good.
There will be no delays on any of that. What work still needs to be done? Mostly artwork, but I'll give credit to our artists. A lot of them are already putting in the work, despite the fact that many of them don't work without deposits. They're just as excited about this as we are. I mean, I'll send you some of the artwork later if you want to see for yourself, but like Sam Dillon has 4 different versions of the cover he's done for us. Sam Dillon was an artist who's, in addition to a decade of his own work, he worked a lot with a magazine called Tales of the Magician's Skull. And that was the gold standard for modern sword and sorcery in my mind. But we have the version of the cover that's in our Kickstarter, which is a fine cover. It has Hanavar, Sarumos, and Shintara Oba sharing a cover together because we couldn't decide between the 3 who should get the cover. But Sam, ever the self-driven man, came to us with 3 other versions of that same cover. And we're actually letting people who pay into the Indiegogo vote on which one they prefer. Because we are firm believers that the customer is always right. Vox populi, vox dei. But we get everything we need. 2 issues.
Indeed.
2 issues next year. And I'm thinking we have a couple of Dark Horse candidates, but it's looking like Stackpole and Rockio are good candidates for our covers for the remaining 2. And we might do a subheader cover for each one as well. But we will split the stories between them. We've got a couple cards we have to hold close to the vest for issue 3. But assuming we fund all of them, we've got about 20,000 words left per magazine. First step will be filling that. We may approach a couple authors, but our intention is to save that for submissions. Then it's just artwork, getting that done, formatted, everything done. We're well on our way that issue 1 will drop in February. Artwork's in the work right now. Covers completed, no matter which cover we end up going with. And the graphic design team we work with, they also worked on Anvil Magazine, one of those stretch goals with our add-ons, rather, for Indiegogo. For those of you who want a taste of what we've done in the past, we're throwing in the past 4 issues of Anvil Magazine, get you up to speed. A few of those authors we have, including Eric Watts, TJ Markey, are in Anvil, so you can get a taste of what they're like when they get to cook with gas. And of course, see just what beautiful work our team does putting together these magazines, because part of what drew me to Iron Age Media was Anvil was regularly published. They put out 4 issues in a year, each one more beautiful than the last, professional level art design, great quality stories. And you don't see that a lot from even the newsstand magazines, much less the indie ones. But we've got the designs, we've got the stories. It's mostly a matter of making sure we've got the money to pay our authors and our artists. We get that, we've got the products, and they will be beautiful. But for the more ambitious stuff, one of the things while this crowdfunder is ongoing is I'm going to DragonCon to meet with a bunch of audiobook companies, including one who I'm not going to give away any names because this is one of their wild ideas, and some of it might be proprietary, but they've worked a lot in the music industry, anime dubbing, and want to bring some of that background and some of those connections to audiobooks, to do maybe a full cast audiobook with some music behind it. Something you don't see a lot of from the Audible set. And
but I love it.
We've got some interesting authors that would be well suited to that format, and I'd love to see that played around with, because you get sort of like an old school radio drama with that feel to it. I love like the old Shadow radio dramas or Doc Savage radio plays. You can't beat that. And if we can do something like that for audiobook with Sword and Sorcery, that's a beautiful little product I would love to be able to put out. The other is, of course, merchandise. We are going to be rolling out posters, trading cards, a lot of this tied to the characters, with the added bonus that half of every dollar goes to the artist and the author. We don't want it so that they don't have as much of a stake in its success as we do, and we want to make sure that they get their share. Or, on a related wild note, we're going to have some interesting tie-ins and promotion things. For example, the panel van. We all remember the heyday of Sword and Sorcery with the old panel vans with Conan or Frazetta paintings on the side. And we desperately want to bring that back. So to any of you with a panel van and a can of spray paint, pick up a copy of Battleborn, because we're going to have a deal where if you put one of our characters on the side of your car, and take a picture, of course, so we have the proof, you get a free subscription for life.
My goodness.
I mean, on one hand, you're going to be the talk of every town you drive that beauty through. It's free advertising for us. And on the other hand, we get to bring back another proud Sword and Sorcery tradition. Or the other one is, because a couple of our authors are well connected within independent rock and metal and that music scene, we want to renew metal partnership between heavy metal and Sword and Sorcery. So for any bands looking to be the next one to make a rock opera in the style of Michael Moorcock or Roger Zelazny or Robert E. Howard, as they did in days far past, have we got the stuff for you? You write a song about one of our guys, we'll send you a free issue for inspiration. Believe me, we want that. You want that. And I know our cover artists certainly wouldn't mind becoming the next Ken Kelly either. For some background, Ken Kelly did a lot of the covers for Kiss, Manowar, and a lot of the Conan paperbacks. I'm a Frazetta nut for life, but Ken Kelly's an easy number 2 for me. Easy.
Very good. Very good. Fun.
It is.
I don't have a van or anything, but I would have liked to do something like that.
Well, we're open to ideas. Really cool. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm in this for 3 reasons: love of the genre, love of these writers, and love of the community. And if there's a way I can better serve any or all of the above, I'm open to requests, advice, submissions, even people telling me there's a way I could do things better. Case in point, rolling out the Indiegogo. A lot of people said they would prefer if we would had a backer kit or a Kickstarter. We're actually rolling out a backer kit as we speak to plug into that Indiegogo. Likewise, a lot of overseas people who are a little worried about how we're shipping overseas, because that is a huge question mark for a lot of outlets, especially crowdfunders. We are exploring solutions. That is a promise. And even if it ends up being as inelegant as adding shipping costs to the total price of sending you your goodies, we want to make sure that being overseas or even in Canada doesn't preclude you from getting Battleborn delivered right to your hands where it belongs.
Of course, and it'll be dangerous to get something this based into Canada. You might get some people in trouble. I understand anything over a certain amount of testosterone is verboten in their Sharia state.
I mean, don't tell some of our authors that. Hernstrom, Wog, and a couple others are Canadian.
We'll have to rescue them.
That's okay. A few more Sword and Sorcery stories, and they'll be honorary Americans in effect.
True. Actually, there is, not that I mean this as an insult, there's a little something European about Skylar Hernstrom. The fatalism and things like Thune's vision and whatnot are absolutely fantastic. Practically mythological. You said Thune's vision. It is a guarantee that I'll support. Certainly by the.
I mean, that's one of
the physical copy, of course.
That's just one of the things I do love about Sword and Sorcery. There's all sorts of tools to play with. You can have a European author deeply influenced by the American Civil War and making his figures within setting talk like old cowboy westerns. You can have a man born in, who lives in the American Southwest, but who prefers samurai and kaiju and creates a sword and sorcery setting that involves that. An expecting mother in Maryland bring up Genghis Khan and the Mongolian death worm into her mythos. Geography is not the destiny here. Love of heroes, and of course the rule of cool, that is the reigning factor here. And I mean, I've seen all sorts of wild stuff from our authors, no matter where they come from, the kind of curveballs that make every editor sit up and smile.
Yeah. This is that you were working on Anvil Mag before, so you actually know what you're doing for quite a bit of this, in ways that I think some projects simply don't get.
That, and I'll give full credit where it's due. I've learned a lot working with Bane, working with Analog. I've had some great teachers. Heck, for that matter, Howard Andrew Jones. I will never be able to repay some of the stuff I learned just in conversation with him, some of the lessons he taught me, some of the friends I owe to him. I pick up little tools of the trade from nearly everyone I work with, everyone I work under, or everybody who works under me. It's something I deeply love about working within the genre, is there's always something new to learn, another twist, another thing you didn't see coming. There's never a day where there's not something new under the sun. And that's the kind of thing you want to see in the creative arts. For everyone thinking that it's just another repetitive trend, no. Just because Hollywood keeps pumping out crap superhuman multiverse stories with terrible heroes doesn't mean that's all there is. You just got to know where to look, and I'm doing my damnedest to make sure you know to look in the pages of Battleborn.
And like I said earlier, it's pretty important. Because if they're not made, they don't get made. And that sounds like a weird tautology, but in reality, that's the state of the things. If you're not helping make the things that you want to read, you just don't get to read them.
And just as important is you don't give attention to the stuff you hate, because for one, you're doing exactly what they want. You're falling into their trap. There's a whole again, I worked in mass communications and journalism for 10 years. I know full well that fan baiting is a giant part of the marketing strategy for a lot of this stuff. If you can't get people to love you, you can at least get people to hate you and get people to hate the people that hate you. And by connection, suck it up and support you. Which, besides the fact you're giving money, attention, and time to something you don't like, and that is poison for your soul if ever there was one, you're taking away that time, money, and support from something you love. Like, don't get me wrong, I get the temptation to crack out the shotgun, walk over to the barrel, and shoot some fucking fish. But if everyone who hated that stupid dancer art from D&D had looked at, say, Crusaders and Castles, or Dungeon Crawl Classics, or any of the indie scene, tabletop RPGs that haven't flipped the bird to their fan base, or still maintain that heroic tradition, or are doing wild and creative things that Wizards of the Coast hasn't done in 20 years, we'd be better off for it. Likewise, all the people who say that, oh, there hasn't been, that tradition died with Conan, that wasn't even true back in the 30s. There were still authors like C.L. Moore, Clark Ashton Smith, who kept writing that sort of sorcery. Paul Anderson, Michael Moorcock, David Drake, Charles Saunders. There are any numbers of classic works, and more importantly, modern works that are still part of that tradition, that don't hate the readers who love that tradition, that very much need that support from readers. That stupid D&D picture of the dancer, give me a moment. I'll actually give the accurate numbers rather than just recounting, because I am a firm believer in accuracy where I can. But that stupid picture of the dancers probably got what? What are we thinking? Views. 500,000 just on Twitter alone, probably.
1 million and change. Maybe 6 million.
1.7 million, 887 quote tweets. I just want to point out that you could take a fraction of those page views and put any single author on the New York Times bestseller list without breaking a sweat. That if every single one of those 887 quote tweets gave Battleborn $5, we'd be funded. And not just funded to one of the top levels. And don't get me wrong, I get the appeal of dunking on just corporate stupidity. There is a certain satisfaction of taking a whack at the piñata. But you're not doing anything to build up something you love. And there is something you love out there that could use the support. And I encourage everyone out there to go find it, whatever that may be. And that's...
It's so easy to doom and gloom and be a black pillar and stuff like that. Balance to it. Like guys like Isaac Young can certainly balance it out, good friend, and to his other authors, which not all black pillars are. In fact, very few are. Also, he's a zoo, and let's be real. If a bird them, they wouldn't notice. These things are, well known for the suffering, but it's especially for guys like myself, who's Gen Y, and I'm not going to ask you, but you seem like I'm Gen Y yourself. It's like what are I'm not gonna, I'm done shit, It's like no more blackpilling, in the trenches and stuff. Because it's easier. It's always so much easier to talk. Oh, don't you know how dead Star Wars is? Kathleen Kennedy is going to be fired at any time. That the stockholders are mad at her. Bullshit. Don't you know?
If I had $1 for every single stupid video saying Kathleen Kennedy is going to be fired, I could buy Star Wars from Disney. Or, given I prefer this, give Tim Zahn and Mike Stackpole enough money to create something better than Star Wars, because that's the better route. And we owe it to ourselves to try and do that. The entire point of not just fan baiting, but advertising and propaganda in general is to make you feel like you're powerless, that you're a minority, that you don't have the control. You are an army of one against an army of millions. To make you feel isolated and different. Here's the trick, though. You're really not. And more importantly, you have more control than you think. It's your money, your time, your attention. You vote every single time you crack out your debit card or your eyeballs. Use them accordingly.
Yeah. It's very true. It's like it always says, will do whatever you tell them if you give them a strong enough vision or story. Have that charisma, King, just because he clearly, it took a bit for them to rebel against him. In the sword of that, it took a propaganda poet and money and even before people rebelled against his kingdom. Yet you have to be willing ignore you're gonna get canceled. who cares anymore? Like, this is this is Trump's America. I can't be canceled. I work for a small business. You know, than I do because they're business owners. These things. It's like there's. You simply you have no power over me. God with nothing better to do with it. Of course, you quietly and make sure that the know that you're actually holding people to ransom, which is just the natural, the safety precautions we should have. Well, canceling has no power. Swatting has. I work as a bouncer, and so I relationship the police officer. But it's a new. I think the projects change. I've been in Iron Age media for quite some time, but the projects didn't feel before. There was a certain amount of do this, and it's kind of like when comics were very few people actually delivered on their grand comic vision. You know what I mean?
I do, and the unfortunate. I get why there's one of the critical flaws of crowdfunding. Unfortunately, is that for every one that delivers, there are 3 that fail, and those are the ones that fund. There are many more that don't even get to that point. That's one of the reasons I will come to judge myself, to judge Iron Age media by our successes and our failures. I have the resume. We have the stories. We've already had 4 issues of an existing magazine.
Yeah.
And this one is going to be primo. Absolutely beautiful. And I hope it becomes a part of the beating heart of the sword and sorcery renaissance we're seeing unfold. Especially because, among other things, I'm a new father. I want there to be that thriving sword and sorcery scene for when my kids are picking up paperbacks the way I was. Hell, I want there to be paperbacks for them to pick up that don't have Japanese schoolboys slaying demons to impress their cousin they're trying to hit on.
Oh, how big solo leveling is? It has no.
I may or may not have been referencing solo leveling specifically.
Yeah.
The best thing to come from that has been the parodies.
Yes.
But
it's very difficult because these things, it's like, what's the cultural run? Solo leveling. Solo leveling was popular.
A YouTube video where he fights Kendrick Lamar, that's its legacy.
It's fantastic. It's I'm sure. But no, these things are very much tiny, small, minute potatoes compared to actually doing real work. The masses can be pushed around wherever. They're barely things. It's better for us to put our noses to the ground and work. Because even though solo leveling or whatever may have so many views, in reality it comes to nothing. People aren't copying solo leveling. Not really. People are copying things like Sword Art Online, solo leveling ripped off of, and others. Korean manhwa is a stump of what it used to be, and it used to be quite impressive. It's better than manga in many regards. But discussion, the Matt from Samsung has done absolute damage to the whole genre.
It's done some good too. Like, don't get me wrong. There are some gems in all of that. I'm a diehard fan of Berserk. It should be no surprise. But even then, like you said, there is a diminished.
No, I meant the change in format comics rather than manga in general. Manga is fine. Quality always rises to the top, but not saying that Koreans who just boredly roll over it on to the 18-hour Samsung factory. You just don't even try.
And there's the other part of it too, just that. I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. It's just, as far as diminishment goes, it feels to some extent we're following the path of the American comic book industry. They made a terrible pivot back in the 1990s where they abandoned kids and young readers in favor of, I guess at the time, divorced dentists with money to buy 6 different Spider-Man covers every week. They gave up an audience of millions for a slightly more financially well-off audience of hundreds of thousands, that then dwindled to an audience of tens of thousands and now sits at thousands of thousands. The kind of numbers that keep a comic afloat today in American comics, especially superheroes, would have gotten them canceled before the first issue dropped back in the 1980s or 90s.
True.
And I worry we're following a lot of that with publishing. That the 3-piece combo, so to speak, of Harry Potter, Twilight, Hunger Games, or depending on how you followed, Harry Potter, Twilight, 50 Shades, the impact that had of making entire publishing companies abandon not just young male readers, but young female readers in favor of a dwindling market of middle-aged women who buy YA novels, or novels that read like YA novels or fanfic, is disastrous, because you had an audience of tens of millions. I mean, you look at the sales numbers for authors in the 80s and 90s and even the early 2000s, and even on a bad release, they put up the kind of numbers that would get you on the bestseller list today. And TradPub's side, there hasn't been a really big breakout sales success in the past decade, other than maybe V.E. Schwab. Sanderson, he published his first book in 2003. Scalzi, 2006. Larry Correia, 2010. I mean, you name an author who's making waves now and actually selling books, almost all of them got their start years ago, especially on the TradPub side. And I worry we've erased the entrance ramp for a lot of people on that front, or maybe we haven't reversed in time. And I'm hoping I'm wrong on that one. And for that matter, I'm basing our business model on catering to an audience that is ill catered to by romantasy. Again, nothing against the people who like their cozy fantasies or their romantasies, but I want higher ambition from my fantasy heroes than opening a coffee shop within work. Like, not to brag.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, I've got a pretty nice little life here. I own a home. I have a wonderful wife, a beautiful kid. Have the American dream where I have a dog in a yard. You don't need to sell me cozy. You need to sell me adventure. You need to sell me heroics, daring do, the kind of thing that makes the pulse pound in ways that domesticity simply doesn't. And I imagine a lot of people the same way, where they work. You're not going to sell a cozy coffee house fantasy to somebody who spends 6 hours a week working in a 6 hours a day working in a restaurant. They need escapism. They need heroics. And for that matter, so do so many blue-collar workers, soldiers, frontliners, firemen, policemen. We used to be a country where our coal miners had reading groups. And not just for like Western pulp fiction. They would discuss Greek philosophy, Marcus Aurelius. And we've gone to a point where, if we're lucky, we can get people to read werewolf romantasy fan fiction. And I want to do my part to reverse that. Hopefully Battleborn will. At least some small part.
It's like I said earlier, it's important, these things. That's the big problem. Like, and it's very much a boomer expectation, but also a Gen X and Gen Y, and then maybe even upper expectation that, daddy government will come in and fix something. It's like, no, we are part of the problem. We love you for it. We love you for it. That's not what's going to. Excuse me. That's not what you of anything. Fundamentally, if you were to look at 1910s and 1920s and 30s, the mainstream guy who, what would he have said? Oh, detective fiction was selling because our Sherlock Holmes was big. Oh, it's Victorian romances. Oh, it's French cheating on each other novels. It's oh, hold on. I forgot to turn on the light, so I'm in the dark. The dark.
Literally, I'm literally stumbling in the dark.
Literally stumbling in the dark. Please help me. Somebody, this isn't. I'm stuck in a non. These things destroy the will to act. The more important fast wave images that was made. Trump was nobody's coming to save you. An image of like soul. Like it's true. Coming to save us. We've only got ourselves. There's a reason why, my top did need to quite a bit. It's because I understand who my enemies are, and I want to make sure my friends are taken care of. It's like enemies, like some SFWA. I understand they're women, but they hate you. They want to trans your kid. They want to destroy everything you're trying to write. And they think it's funny when you're sad about it. It's like, but I must treat this person with respect. Don't you know she's a industry? It's like no. The only reason I'm telling not to spit on her is because it's a crime. People would hate Battleborn. They would hate Pinkerton's ghosts. They would hate this. They would hate that. They would hate it all. So you should, rather than think about Sifwa or Star Wars and Star Trek with their mavens and their hatred of the white man and their hatred of all things good and of people who aren't themselves to because they're ill, you should, of course, support things like Battleborn Mad, Pinkerton's Ghost. I haven't said it yet, but if you're gonna love Battleborn Mag because we have the same people in it.
Big fan of the lads and lasses over at Sokovia. They've done a lot of good work. They continue to wave that pulp banner proudly and keep fighting the good fight. A lot of people do. But that's, again, what draws me to Sword and Sorcery. We live in an age of dragons. Why shouldn't we have fiction that features dragon slayers?
Yes. Absolutely. I think people will, time goes on, really were very good ones to begin with. Yes. All right. Well, I've said everything I can, and I don't have my on vacation at the beach, and I don't like. Look, I'm wearing some clothes here. I'm on a polo shirt. This is. I don't even know what to do with myself. Um, yeah. How do you want to finish?
Could you repeat that?
How would you like to finish this out? Give us a last rousing call to action.
So, let me finish by asking a question. The greatest question. What is best in life? Aye, the thrill of the fight, the red meat and dark lifter, the kiss of your lover and the laughter of your children, and telling tales of heroes. Stories of daring do and blood and thunder, dashing rogues and hard-fighting heroes, golden glory, spilling an ocean blood and guts along the way. You remember those stories. You remember the time you picked up your first Conan paperback. You remember when rolling dice still had an air of danger. Maybe you remember growing your hair out and rocking out to heavy metal based on Roger Zelazny and Michael Moorcock. Maybe you've devoted yourself to the works of masters like Howard Andrew Jones, Robert E. Howard, or the countless others that have carried the torch of that tradition. Then Battleborn is the place for you. The kind of sword and sorcery that makes your heart pound, puts a fire in your belly, and burns a place in your very soul. Dedicated to presenting all new sword and sorcery by the finest modern masters and rising stars, and reprinting the very best genre classics and modern gems of a new generation. For a new generation. Back us and join our ranks today in our never-ending battle to bring blood and thunder back to the front lines of fantasy. If you love for heroic fantasy, beats in your chest like a battle drum, join us. Become a hero. Become a legend. Become Battleborn. And we will see you on the battlefield. How's that for a plug?
Yes, I am fantastic flopping at the mouth. Frothing. Actually, the raccoon bit me earlier. That might be something else. But I'm also excited to purchase Battleborn Mag. I will certainly be supporting you at the Reaver level, though I will be looking very carefully at the Slayer level.
I will say, the Slayer level,
yes.
Ooh, yeah, comes with a throwing knife, and as an extra level of temptation, without even any add-ons, would put us over the top for $5,000. You could be the man to do it.
Heroic deeds without peer, in fact. These are the things that pump the blood, especially since I cannot go berserk in certain areas soon. But thank you very much for joining us, Sean. You've been a wonderful guest. I should definitely have you on again, perhaps Battleborn 2. Battleborn 2. It'll number 1. There must be a number 2.
It'll be a pleasure.
It will be.
Until then, swords together.